Buonasera, Marco.
Ciao, Dominic. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Usually when we do these, we are thousands of miles, kilometers, choose your distance apart. But if there were not a wall between us right now, we would be looking at each other.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree.
So there's been a lot of talk about the two, minor or major issues, I guess. But we thought we would talk about something entirely different tonight that can be used a couple of different ways. Whether this is for somebody that's looking to do Iuri Sanguinis but is having challenges, or whether it's somebody that has no connection to Italy whatsoever that wishes to come spend some time here, live here, etc. So these are the mythical, in my mind anyways, unicorn, the Italian digital nomad visa, and the much more common elective residency visas.
Yes, Dominic, thanks for your introduction. Well, third live together, a live stream together. In the previous ones, we have addressed the collateral topics that are regarding the main domain of the citizenship, Italian citizenship. And as you already mentioned, something which is about the minor issue, which most likely is about to be solved in a way or the other. Fingers crossed, as well as the new decree, the so-called Tajani decree that was converted into law in late May. And also with that, we will probably have some news by the beginning of the next year. So as you already know, and the people watching at our stream may already know, I'm an attorney practicing into immigration law, and I'm specialized in Italian citizenship under many different aspects. You know that there is not only the Iure Sanguinis domain, but also many others, the naturalization, which is the one through residency, the marriage, there are the reacquisition of citizenship. There are many kind of situations that could take place and that need to be addressed. So I'm specialized in that, as well as in permits and visa. So I basically try to turn into reality the willingness or the dream, it depends, of moving to
the dolce vita.
The dolce vita, yes. I mean, it's not always a dolce vita, but I would say yes, why not? Also that. But in general, I would say that the goal to reach this country and to try to get integrated in here and to having, of course, to doing so a permit or a visa, or the best option, a passport that could allow these people to make reality this goal, this dream, this willingness.
I mean, for a certain set of people, that is the dream, absolutely. But for others that don't even have that connection, there is a whole nother series of options as well. And we even might talk a little bit about where there might be some tax benefit between not necessarily being a citizen, but being a resident as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are tax benefits related to that. That there is a flat tax for retired non-EU citizen or foreigner citizen moving to Italy in some cities with less than 20,000 inhabitants, so town basically, or villages. This is a measure that is trying to, favoring the immigration from some kind of category of people that are seeking for relocating somewhere else, especially to Italy. In this case, even though I knew also about some other countries, adopting the same policy on this, but I prefer, not to get too much into depth about this, because commercialistas, they are way better on this, but I would be more than happy to tackle this topic maybe with my commercialista someday, because this could be also very interesting for the people who's listening to or watching to our streaming. That is definitely a benefit and an advantage, I would say, for everybody in these conditions seeking for a relocation to Italy.
Yeah, and like you said, this is cities under, I believe, 20,000 people, and they have to be mainly in the south of Italy. So pretty much not quite, but south of Rome is where the line's going to start. You want to start with elective residency or the digital nomad visa?
We are about to analyze are basically the DNV or the ERV. So digital nomad visa or the elective residency visa are basically two different kind of visas. The requirements could be similar in some case, but mostly they are oriented to a different category of possible applicants. So let's start from the digital nomad, which is the most recent one, and then we can,
Mm,
also have a look to the elective residency visa. So when it comes to the digital nomad visa, it is something that has been definitely triggered and triggered by the pandemic of COVID. So we know that it has changed the world definitely and has accelerated a process that was already in place for many companies, many workers out also
mhm,
of Italian borders, of course, to start working remotely. This is something that, of course, could be also exploited by countries that are seeking for immigrants, highly qualified immigrants, especially in order to have, a flow of people, immigrants
mm,
that could also bring something to the country and having them not necessarily working in the place, but
mm.
remotely with the country of
And, and
origin
I
or
and
with
I
other countries.
and I believe Italy's as well as Portugal's and a lot of the major other digital nomad visas are very clear that the money you earn is generally from not that country. You're bringing currency into the country. You're not working within the country. Is that correct? Or are you allowed to source Italian work and do Italian work from Italy on a digital nomad visa?
No, what you said is correct. I mean, with a digital nomad visa, it's a way to let some, not only people, but in this case also currency to be in the country from the outside.
Mhm,
Of course, then it depends also from which country the applicant is coming, the foreigner is coming. It is definitely more favorable regime and kind of visa for those countries in which wages are higher than the average in here, which are also related, of course, with the cost of life
mm,
here. So it is definitely giving also an opportunity to those villages, to those tiny towns and villages, especially in the south of Italy, that are, seeing the population decreasing the more and more. And it is not a by chance that there are some also startups,
mm,
developing on this topic, especially for what concerns attracting remote workers
mhm.
to Italy and establishing them, placing them at least for a certain period of time in small villages where they can also give some benefit to the local community in a certain way.
But there is no requirement to live anywhere specific with this visa, is there? You can choose to live wherever you wish to.
Yes, the requirements are others, but not the place where you decide to live.
Okay. So what are the primary requirements for somebody wanting to get a digital nomad visa? And then along with that, what does the process of applying and general timelines look like?
I will give you a list very soon. Just before, I would like just to frame a little bit the
Mm,
context that I started to analyze before, because Italy arrived pretty late in
yes,
introducing this
very
kind
late.
of very late. If you think that Italy is one of the most attractive countries still, no matter, despite the perception, especially of locals, on how our country is going, and of course, despite also what is actually happening in certain fields in our country, but still, the attractiveness of our country is very high, is very strong, and we could have expected this visa to be introduced pretty earlier than actually happened.
Mm,
But better later than never. And in February 2024, so it's not even a year and a half, but the actual conversion of the decree law issued took place then in April 2024. So 1 year and a half since we have this digital nomad visa in place, we got the regulations. Why regulations? Because
mm,
beforehand, like 2 years before, or a law was already issued by the government, by Italian government, to have in parliament to have a digital nomad visa, but it was not actually regulated in detail. So there were no specified requirements. We didn't know about the threshold for instance, the wage income, the annual income, and some other details that were needed to know in order to process this kind of application. So this happened finally last year, and still we are in the process to codify in practice this by the local questura, the police headquarters, as well as from consulates out of our borders. So this is very important to frame, because still it could be somehow frustrating to go through this journey of getting such a visa. But just to let you know, it is something that it is normal that it's still in the process to be properly codified into details because we are at the very beginning and still there are the first procedures pending. So let's get to the requirements. So basically for a digital nomad visa and also for the related permit, because when it comes to visa, it's a sticker put on your passport and allows you to get into the country. Then it must be converted. Otherwise, it is pointless to have a visa. Anyway, first thing, of course, is being a foreigner, so non-EU citizen especially. The second requirement is to be within the category of work highly qualified workers, especially to be able to work remotely. Of course, thanks to technology, we can work remotely thanks to a good connection, especially. And or in this case, the always a third requirement, but is alternative from the last one, from the latter that I mentioned, is to with clients which are either inside or outside of Italy. So the work could be either freelance or it could be also a employed work. So we can also talk about employed workers. It is not necessary that you must have a contract from a company. You can also be a freelance worker. It is a bit more, as for my experience, a bit more difficult to prove that, but still absolutely possible. But these are basically the requirements. So being a non-EU citizen, being a highly qualified worker, being able to work remotely, and of course, working remotely as either freelance or an employed worker.
And there also, I presume there to be income thresholds on this as well, revenue thresholds, depending upon if you're self-employed or an employee.
Of course, this is a something that must be then addressed once the application has been sent. So we are, as per now, just analyzed what could be the ground, on which at least we can be considered within that category. Then, in order to be accepted, the application to be accepted, we need to prove something more. The threshold, like that you mentioned, that is absolutely important. The threshold to get the digital nomad visa, it is subject to be changed. It's subject to change throughout years. But I can tell you that in this moment, it is at more or less 28k euros yearly. So it is a wage that it is an annual income that also is related to another category of visa, which is the so-called blue card visa, which is always related to highly qualified workers. So it is strictly connected to that. It is, of course, one of the highest threshold that we could consider, even though we will see that the highest one is the elective residency. But that's a very important requirement, of course, that must be met in order to have then the visa and the permit granted.
Now, with a digital nomad visa, is it just for an individual or it can be used for spouse, children, direct other nuclear family members?
Well, this is something that must be considered as per individual. When it comes to digital nomad visa, there are no express mention about family members that could be brought within this category, of course. But the so-called Testo Unico Immigrazione, so the comprehensive law on immigration in Italy, which is a decree law from 1998, which has been constantly updated, also provides a lot of instruments for family members to obtain a visa or both a visa and a permit. So then once, of course, the foreigner is entitled to residing legally on the Italian territory, then he could get access to all the provided instruments, legal instruments for his or her family members to be granted of family permits. So it is not expressly mentioned in the new law provision of digital nomad visas and permit, but still there is a wide possibility to get access to the other instruments provided by law.
Other things we should talk about the digital nomad visa, or should we move on to the?
No. Definitely, we can. We have something else to say. Just to frame it also in terms of duration. Technically, even though I guess it's very limited case, digital nomad visa and permit could be granted also to those foreigners who are willing to relocate to Italy and working remotely, even for a period of time below the 90 days threshold, the so-called 90 days limit of the Schengen stamp, but of course, it would be kind of pointless. Most of the digital nomads applicants, I would say the 99%, they are applying in order to stay longer than the 90 days. But longer for how long? Well, the digital nomad visa could be granted for a period of time for maximum a year. So it can last for a year, but it is renewable. So for a year, the worker, the remote worker, or the digital nomad, then I also specify what is the difference in between these two concepts, is enabled once it receive, of course, the permit by the local questura to stay in Italy up until a year. Then the same permit, if the conditions still are in place, can be renewed for one more year. So this is very important to know. The difference in between remote worker and digital nomad. So the law, the Italian law, as well as what you can find also on consulates, instructions to apply for such a visa are differentiating these two categories, because the remote workers are those that are considered employed, whilst the digital nomads are the freelance. So when you had any doubt in understanding which category is yours, just by reading, of course, a website from a consulate portal, a landing page on visas, on this kind of visa. Then how does it work for the obtaining of visa and then permit? You have to collect all the documents that you can find on the consulate's websites. They could vary, but in this moment, I would say I had to check throughout some of the most important consulates in North America. So they have pretty much the same list of documents to be provided. So proof of the qualification that you have. So let's say if you are, I don't know, a foreign language teacher, like proof of a graduation of a diploma that allows you to teach that language, for instance. Then a contract is important to prove, at least that you have a contract for an employed worker. A letter from your employee that attests that she or he has not been convicted for a certain kind of crimes that are related to illegal immigration in a certain amount of time previous to the issuing of this declaration, as well as it is important to prove to the Italian authority that you are already in the availability of an apartment. So this is something that must be done in advance. So by having already an apartment, automatically you can also be able, by proving also the other requirements, to have a digital nomad. These are the most important documents to be filed at the consulate. Once the consulate gives you the visa, then of course there is a certain amount of time within, but this applies to all the visas, within which it is possible to travel to Italy, and within 8 days from the arrival to Italy, it must be filed the application to convert that visa into a digital nomad.
Now, this is renewable, so it's a maximum of 2 years. And this is a question that came in on a Reddit, a subreddit for Iuris Sanguinis. Does that time count for, if you were looking for some sort of traditional naturalization, which takes, I believe, 10 years in Italy, would the time in the digital nomad visa or the elective residency visa count towards that?
Well, every legal residence on the Italian territory could be taken into account in order to pile up, the 10 years in order to have the citizenship by naturalization recognized. I guess the only one, if I remember well, is the study visa that doesn't allow you to do so. But the digital nomad visa, I mean, as far as I'm aware, I couldn't see any provisions that is excluding the amount of time of legal residency provided by this title to be used also for the citizenship application. So as per what we also, as for our experience, know, for what we know, there are no preclusions under this aspect.
Okay. But however, the digital nomad visa will not get you to 10 years. You have a maximum of 2. So you need some other approach.
You have constantly to renew it. You have constantly to renew it every time it is about to expire. And given that you are already meeting all the requirements provided by law, then you have to renew it. Then of course, there is a wider perspective for some who renews constantly this kind of digital nomad visa to also get access to longer permits in Italy. So this is something also that could be done. But of course, it is then it must be checked step by step whether it is convenient for the client to get access to the application for the renewal of the digital nomad permit rather than getting access to other permits that could be more favorable.
Elective residency, a whole different category used by many different people. This could be used for a long-term solution, much more so, or again, it could be used as a bridge in a short term if you meet certain criteria, if you are working towards something more permanent like Yuri Sanguinis as well. This one is targeted more at pensioners and passive income, correct?
Yeah, so basically the elective residency visa is for foreigners that wants to relocate to Italy without a work contract, a job contract. So they have to show to the authorities that they can be autonomous under the financial aspects without any contract, without any work, any job. So the widest category to which this permit is oriented is, of course, the retired person. Not only, I mean, is not the only category to which is oriented this kind of permit. You know that recently, especially in the last 10 years, I would say there's a lot of online trading, so people could get a regular income from other kind of sources, which are not necessarily, work contract, jobs.
Or rental income,
And
perhaps.
sorry?
I said rental income, perhaps.
Yes, also rental income. Also, why not? They could be considered as legal as long as they are legal income and they are above a certain threshold that we will say now. Of course, that is a requirement met, absolutely. But of course, most of the time, this kind of elective residency visa applies for retired persons, but that's normal, of course. The applicant will show to the authorities not only this regular income, but also the quantity, the amount of this regular income. And as you mentioned before, the elective residency visa has the same duration of the digital nomad. So 1 year, but as digital nomad visa, it could be renewed constantly, like yearly, as long as the requirements are always met.
So this one's been around a lot longer than the digital nomad visa. It's a lot more well-known. Is this, I mean, when I say difficult to get, I guess the question is more likely, if somebody meets the criteria, are they accepted, or is there some sort of other subjectiveness in there or something that could derail their Italian dream?
What do you mean exactly?
Is it just you meet the criteria, you have X amount of income, you have a clean criminal record, you have probably insurance in Italy and a few other criteria? Is it just checking those boxes and you are guaranteed to get this sort of permit? Or is there, like I said, somebody subjective, something that is not clearly defined that may derail something, the permit?
Well, I would say that elective residency visa has requirements as they are usually also required for other kind of visas. Of course, in some way they differ, but in general, I would say that it's not that easy to be gotten. I mean, it's not that just box checked and here it is, here is the visa. There's still, some things to provide to the authorities. Of course, I mean, besides the application form that must be done properly and the passport with some passport pictures as well. Then there must be given to the authorities, and namely the consulate and the questura, once it has to be converted into a permit, some vital records, especially birth records or marriage if needed. It depends on cases, like from case to case. Then a letter, like a motivational letter, in which it has to be basically explained the reason why the applicant has the willingness to relocate to Italy, the duration of the stay that she or he wants to have, the place of residency in Italy, so where they will establish, or he or she will establish the address, and possibly also the persons that will come along, because this, yes, has some provisions that are expressly mentioned, the possible family members. And this is why also before I mentioned that it could be also provided like marriage certificates, if that is something that it is required by authorities. Let's say that a retired couple wants to move to Italy, the application could be done by just one of the family members, and then proving that, like explaining also that the other one, so the spouse, wants to come along. In that case, you have to prove the marriage certificate, for instance. So there are some other boxes to check. One more, for instance, is the criminal check records from your place of origin. It is not always required. This is, as from my experience, like there are some case in which it was not required expressly. And the same that I mentioned before, like for the digital nomad visa, it is important to provide the authorities with a proof of a contract. A proof of a contract not, of course, a working contract, but a rental contract for an apartment, which is also giving an information to the authorities that that would be the place where the foreigner will like to establish residency.
Are you allowed to move if you don't like the town you're in?
Yeah, absolutely. There is no problem. Of course, in that case, you have to be aware that you are also then required to change your address, or if you change residency, to change your ID, your Italian ID, once you will be gotten that, to basically notice the authorities that you are moving somewhere else. Also, because the competence of the police headquarters, in case you would like to renew your permit, will change. Let's say that you would like to move from Rome to Bari, Puglia, then you have to notice the authorities, the comune especially, that you are changing your residency, and the commune of Bari will be entitled to issue your ID, as well as the police headquarters of Bari will be entitled to issue your renewed elective residency permit.
What is it difficult? Is it fast and easy to renew an elective residency permit?
I think it's basically easier than applying for the first time, because basically must be checked the requirements if they are still in place. So year by year, most of the time, the financial requirement is the most juicy one, I would say. Always remember that the most important thing for the state, for the Italian state, is that the foreigner does not represent a burden, economical burden for the state. So as long as this requirement is met, I believe that there is no big problems. Of course, then proof of the apartment, the availability of an apartment is important to be filed, as well as the other requirements. But for instance, criminal check records from your country are not anymore needed. Under certain aspects, I would say it's an easier process, but still a process to address problems.
So you're going to have to show annual financials, you have a lease, and probably something about your healthcare. Minimum.
Yeah, absolutely. These are the most important thing to prove. Of course, this is something that when it comes to a first application, it is more difficult to file and to collect documents and to wait for the response. When it comes to renew, it is different. It is easier, I would say. You mentioned something important that I forgot to mention when it comes to digital nomad, the insurance. This is something that it is very important to be proven when it comes to the application. So a health insurance that covers the possible, medical expenses and emergency as well, which must be valid in Italy for the whole length of the state. This is very important because it is something that it is officially required by the new law, which is, introducing this kind of permit.
So it sounds like there's a bit of catch-22 or complexity in the fact that you need to prove insurance and accommodation before as you apply for the visa, correct?
Yes.
So in which case, I'm leading up to, it can really help to have somebody like yourself involved in this process, because you can help move these pieces around easily. You know people with apartments, you know how the process works, you know how to time things so that they come together properly. Is that fair?
I would say that rather than the health insurance, which is something that could be easily, provided. I mean, there are a lot of service providers for health insurance out there. But one of the difficulties that some of my clients have encountered when it comes to prove the apartment is given by the fact that the consulates, they always require the contract to be already registered. And in order to, the lease contract, for the apartment. And the lease contract registered entails most of the time the fact that the applicant must already have a codice fiscale. A codice fiscale, it is something that sometimes is given by the consulates in due time, quickly. Sometimes they just lost the application, so they do not issue, and sometimes the appointment is about to come, and so there's a lot of rush. under this aspect, as well as some landlords, they are a bit skeptical on signing a contract that has to be registered, but that actually starts like later than the signing of the contract.
And it's just a challenge in general to find an apartment in Italy. And there's different lease terms in Italy than Americans are used to. Yeah, so there is a bunch of challenges, and almost like you have to put all these things in a perfect order, which is challenging enough for somebody that knows the system and speaks the language, but is going to be extremely challenging, I would say, for a non-Italian speaker.
That's right. That's another story, of course. We talk about real estate, how it's difficult to find a place, and also to let the two parties connected, because sometimes it could be a little bit weird for a landlord, especially in small villages, to hear about an American or a Canadian or a Briton willing to get your apartment in the middle of nowhere, possibly. But yeah, that's definitely a fact. But talking about the Codice Fiscale, for instance, this is something that can be easily solved. There's no problem. I heard it happened to me to hear or to read on a website that someone could not get a Codice Fiscale as long as he didn't prove that he was living regularly in Italy for at least 6 months. Absolutely not true. A Codice Fiscale, if there is a reason to be issued to a foreigner not residing in Italy yet, it could be issued without any problem, without any issues. That's the case for digital nomad visa, and to prove that there is an apartment ready for the applicant once he comes or she comes here. The registered contract could be registered, of course, only if the applicant has a Codice Fiscale. It is very easy to ask this to the consulates to be issue Codice Fiscale, and if the consulates does not respond in time, it can be also done by power of attorney here in Italy at the competent Agenzia delle Entrate office. It is enough to prove that there is a procedure of digital nomad visa, an application going on, that there is a need to register a contract, and then with all the data information, of course, the Codice Fiscale will be issued.
So you might have luck and get it yourself. And if not, there are services out there that do this. Absolutely. Anything else everybody out there should know? So we've talked about these two visas. We talked about how they can be used standalone or as a bridge if you're looking for Iuris Sanguinis in the next upcoming time. Anything else anybody should know about these? Any services that you offer that you think can help people do this? I mean, you were my Sherpa when I was going through this process. You helped me negotiate an apartment through the process as well. And you also acted as my translator when I presented my documents to the Comune, which is an entirely different topic that we hope we can talk about again soon when the rules allow such things easily again.
Those memories are still clear in my mind, of course, about your pathway, which was not the easiest one to get citizenship, but in the end we made it. And you are a witness of that. But yeah, I mean, definitely these are topics that I must say are seeing an increase of demands, since citizenship domain, at least temporarily, has been made a little bit more difficult to be pursued. I noticed a increase in application for digital nomad and elective residency visa, because yes, of course, with a very long term, but still are instruments to get citizenship in the end. But after all, are instruments to relocate. So if your willingness is to relocate to Italy, just be aware that there are these two very good instruments. The elective residency is more targeted on retired person or those who have the possibility to earn at least 31K yearly. We didn't mention this threshold, if I'm not wrong. 31K yearly euros, of course. Definitely, that is something that is more targeted to that category. Whilst digital nomad visa, it's something that I have been seeing that it is well targeted to youngsters, to young professionals, to people that are really like to explore the possibility to relocate to Italy. So this is definitely something that can be pursued. There is now this instrument available. It's been a year and a half, but now we are getting to the most juicy part, in which also are about to in the process to be issued the first visas and permits of this kind of category. So I encourage everybody who wants to use these pathways to do it. And if you need assistance, of course, you can inquire my legal firm my person, of course, because I will be more than happy to help you throughout this process.
All right. Well, maybe we will talk about this again after we get some more information of how things are going and the first several are through. But no, it's been a good chat. For anybody that has questions, I put both of our email addresses here. You can reach out. And with that, I say buona sera.
Yeah, or better buonanotte, I would say, because here is pretty late. I mean, it was a pleasure, Dominic, as always, to have chatted with you about this very important topic, and I hope to, and I'm pretty sure we will have another stream together, live stream together, maybe to bring some good news about citizenship. Who knows?
We can always hope. So with that, buonanotte. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, fingers crossed. Bye bye.